Dr. Oldfield, who will discuss MRSA prevention and protection for employees. Dr. Oldfield is a graduate of the University of Virginia. He received an undergraduate degree there as well as attending their medical school. He is a board certified in internal medicine and infectious diseases. Dr. Oldfield served on active duty in the United States Navy as a medical corps officer for 22 years, serving for 5 years as specialty advisor to the Surgeon General of the United States Navy for infectious disease. He currently is professor of medicine and microbiology and molecular cell biology at Eastern Virginia Medical School. He is the director of the Division of Infectious Disease and co-founder and director for the Center for Comprehensive Care for Immune Deficiency. In addition, he is director of the Infectious Disease Fellowship Training Program at Eastern Virginia Medical School. Dr. Oldfield is the chairman of the Infection Control and Hospital Epidemiologist for Terra North General Hospital as well. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Edward Oldfield.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. What we're going to talk about is a little bit of the M, the R, the S, and the A, and what it's all about. I think the reason I'm here is because of the death of a high school student in Bedford County in the fall and the panic that generated. I think what you're going to find out is this was a very severe, widespread problem long before that happened. And with appropriate education, that panic should have never happened. I also want to spread out and cover more for you because I really want to get into a little bit of this war that we've had with bacteria ever since our species came on the face of the earth 200,000 years ago. And the bacteria have been here for billions of years. So MRSA is only the problem of the moment, and we're going to be dealing with different bacteria forever. And then I'm not so sure we're going to win in the end. So with that, let's go back about 40 years and see what we thought about infectious diseases. So about 40 years ago, the Surgeon General of the United States said, the time has come to close the book on infectious diseases. We have basically wiped out infection in the United States. And that's really a rather extraordinary comment. I think even these guys are shocked that anybody would make a comment like that. And obviously 40 years later, we know that he was off by a mile or more. So, bacteria have been fighting battles for billions of years. They live in the soil with other organisms, and they've been fighting each other ever since they're on the face of the earth. And what they produce is antibiotics. And essentially all the antibiotics we have are derived from these soil organisms, and we've just basically co-opted what they've been using for billions of years to fight each other. Beta-lactam antibiotics are antibiotics that have a beta-lactam ring. That's cephalosporins like Keflex and penicillins. They were produced by bacteria. We actually found the first cephalosporin in a sewer in Sardinia in this cephalosporium fungus. So they were the producers of these beta-lactam antibiotics. And other bacteria said, well, I'm going to protect myself from those. And they produced enzymes called beta-lactamases that broke open the beta-lactam ring and protected them. And then other bacteria said, hey, I'm way ahead of you, and they produced beta-lactamase inhibitors that actually blocked the beta-lactamases that broke down the beta-lactams. And we've actually stolen each one of these from the bacteria and made it into the antibiotics we use. And bacteria will go even one step further. They actually have sex. They have sex between species. They're extremely promiscuous, and they can pass their genetic elements for resistance from one bacteria to the other. In fact, one called an enterococcus, if it has a resistance gene, it produces a pheromone, which is like a perfume that attracts other bacteria, so it can have sex with them and transmit its gene. So I'm not sure what's going on the left, but this is actually two bacteria with the sex pili transmitting genetic material from one to the other. The other problem we've got is the antibiotic paradox. We've taken these from bacteria, and the more we use them, the faster we lose them. And they figure out a response, which they've done for billions of years, and they overcome our antibiotics and develop resistance. And as much as we use antibiotics, they're the second most commonly prescribed drug that we use. Up to 50% of total hospital drug expenditures, a quarter of all adverse drug events in the hospital. Given all that, 50% of the time, physicians either use the wrong drug, the wrong dose, or the wrong duration. You know, you think we could get it right after a while, and I can just hear them laughing at us as we misuse these antibiotics on a daily basis. And what's causing this? I think physicians are under extreme demands for productivity. For primary care physicians, they may have a 10 or 15-minute slot to see a patient with all of their problems. We use reduced diagnostic tests to save money, so we're using empirical therapy of antibiotics based on what we think might be happening. There's a lot of direct-to-consumer advertising, which I think you all see. And then consumer activism. People come to the office and say, this is what I want. So it's not surprising that the small voice of therapeutic restraint concern about antimicrobial resistance is difficult to hear above the din. And then there's antibiotic marketing. You know, the pharmaceutical companies spend about $9 billion a year on product advertising and detailing. And you think they're going to market for the inexpensive generics like penicillin? No, they're marketing for this very broad spectrum, very expensive antibiotics that are under patent. And what do you think your physician has in the sample closet if you need a sample antibiotic? The most expensive, the newest, the most broad spectrum, the one more likely to lead to resistance. Sir William Osler said the desire to ingest medicines is one of the principal features that distinguish man from animals. And this drug hunger, in which patients only feel satisfied by receiving a prescription, may help explain the 160 million antibiotic prescriptions annually. That's about 12.5 tons of antibiotics we use. We use about another 12 tons in animals, if you can believe that. And then the concept is becoming more clear that we're just not human beings. You know, we have over 100 billion bacteria in our body. And now people are calling that our own personal microbiome. In fact, if you had an election and your bacteria were allowed to vote against your cells, you'd be outvoted 10 to 1. Because you've got 10 bacteria living in your colon and your mouth and other places for every one cell that your body has. So we're really starting to talk about a superorganism, which is you and all of those bacteria, most of the time living in harmony. And so if you think about it, if you take one of those broad-spectrum antibiotics, what do? You may kill the pathogen off your sore throat or your pneumonia, but you may wipe out half of your own microbiome, which then is going to take quite a while to get back to stability. And the other concept is I think we're really entering a post-antibiotic era. And I don't mean that's when we have fancy immunobiologics so we don't need antibiotics. I mean a time when we regularly face bacteria that are resistant to every single antibiotic we have. So you might as well be returning back to the 1930s. Last week at Oldfield, I saw 2 or 3 bacteria that I had no options to treat at all. And this was an organism I hadn't even seen 6 weeks ago. So this post-antibiotic era is because this high and ever-increasing rate of antibiotic resistance. We have a very uneven supply of novel antibiotics. There are no new antibiotics in the pipeline for gram-negative rods. We've had a dramatic reduction in the number of pharmaceutical companies that are even doing any research on new antimicrobials. And the way they think in their mind is what they call NPVs, or the risk-adjusted net present value. In other words, what they say is, I want a drug that you're on every day for the rest of your life, like something for cholesterol, hypertension. I don't want something that can be for 14 days and cured. So they are absolutely uninterested in development of new antibiotics. And almost all the companies have bailed out of antibiotic development. So let's now switch gears to MRSA. And we'll go into the, like I said, the MRSA, where it really came to prominence, started in September of 2001. And there are complaints from inmates in the LA jail system that they were being bitten by spiders. So they went into the LA jail, they searched for insects, they fumigated, and then they started getting reports from all around LA about other spider bites in the prisons. And in April 2002, they captured 5 spiders. Turned out they were all harmless species, so they couldn't find any spiders that cause severe bites. And then finally, in the spring of 2002, they realized that the residents were sharing razors and other sharp instruments to pop each other's boils, and then transfer and share them from inmate to inmate. So it turned out we had almost 1,000 inmates in the LA County Jail. You can imagine this is a system of 165,000 incarcerated every year. 20,000 a day are housed in that jail system. And here you have the inmates sharing these back and forth. They had a number of hospitalized patients with severe bloodstream infections, heart valve infections, and severe bone infections. And subsequently, there were reports of these MRSA outbreaks in prison systems throughout the United States. So they said that jails increasingly house a new breed of inmate, opportunistic and unfeeling with a taste for human flesh. Jailers and prisoners alike fear attacks as the newcomer moves from cell to cell to skin cell. Of course, that was our MRSA, not. So let's talk a little bit about the only spider in the United States that can cause dermonecrotic skin lesions. If you've got somebody saying a spider bite, there's only one. It's the brown recluse, also called the fiddleback. And so you can see on his back here, this fiddle-shaped structure. That's the brown recluse. Most spiders have 8 eyes. These guys have only 6. Now the question is, has there ever been a brown recluse reported from the state of Virginia? And the answer is never. This is where the, this is where the brown recluse lives. It's predominantly this area right in here, and a little bit along the Mexican border. There has never been a brown recluse reported from the state of Virginia. So for decades, physicians have consistently and confidently used spider bite as a default diagnosis for idiopathic dermonecrosis. Dermonecrosis is necrosis of the skin where the skin dies. You get a thick black scab on top of it, quite painful. And that's what physicians always did. It's a persistent misconception pervading the medical community worldwide. The brown recluse has now obtained an urban myth status equal to that of sightings of Sasquatch, UFOs, Chupacabra, and Elvis. The medical community would do well to relegate spider bite to the bottom of the list of differential diagnosis. Now, I know what Elvis is in UFOs, but the Chupacabra had me a little bit stunned. So it's actually called the goat sucker in Spanish. First reported in the 1990s from Puerto Rico. It's a group of organisms we call cryptids. They're hypothetical species, not only from anecdotal evidence, are also called UMAs, unidentified mysterious animals. So the CDC has actually gone so far, because there's so much confusion about spider bites, to put this poster out to post in the environment and in the workplace if you want it. If you think you have a spider bite, it might actually be an infection. What they mean is MRSA. Because, you know, if you have somebody that says they've got a spider bite in the state of Virginia, one thing you know, it's not a spider bite, it's something else. And in the state of Virginia, they are almost all MRSA infections. Essentially, every spider bite is really going to be MRSA once you get to the bottom of it. So this is what Staph aureus looks like. Let's talk about what these letters mean. So we'll start with Staphylococcus. It's a, you can do a gram stain and bacteria stain either red or blue. Gram-positive stain blue. It's a coccus, so it's a round organism, and they grow in clusters like a grape cluster. The genus is Staphylococcus, and then they call it aureus because when you grow it in the laboratory, it's golden in color. So that's how it got its name, Staphylococcus aureus. And there are 2 major species that you can divide between the 2 by a test we do in the lab called coagulase. If it's coagulase negative, now we call it Staphylococcus epidermidis. This is a normal bacteria that lives on your skin. Essentially, everybody has staph epidermidis on their skin. It's not an infection control concern. It's not a concern in the work environment. It can cause infections if you have foreign bodies like IVs or a prosthetic hip or a knee. And most of these are methicillin resistant. They are that same methicillin resistance this MRSA has, and we often call these MRSE. So be aware, you can have methicillin resistance, and if it's a staph epi, who cares? It doesn't mean anything at all.